Everybody. All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. Welcome to the Mineral Extraction Committee meeting for Thursday, September 20th, 2018. We're going to start off. We got a pretty full agenda, so we're going to jump in with some introductions real quick of the committee, and then we'll start talking through the charge and what we've been doing, and then we'll open up for some input. So I guess if we want to start with some introductions to the board, I guess Regan, do you want to start?
Hello, my name is Regan Thibodeau, and I live, well, in the newest, the first house on Lakeside Drive, when you come into that area.
And hello, I'm Kathy Wharf. I live on Forest Ave in Wyndham.
I'm Sparky Hergen. I've served on the Comprehensive Plan Review Team, the Long Range Planning Committee, and Wyndham resident.
Drew Mayo, Wyndham resident. I serve on the planning board.
Hi, I'm Tim Tamberg, 406 Falmouth Road, lifetime resident of Wyndham.
Hi, I'm Danny Shaw. I live on 6 Bob's Way in Wyndham and with Shaw Brothers Construction.
Hi, I'm Amanda Lassard. I'm the planner. I'm helping staff the Mineral Extraction Committee.
And we have a special guest tonight to help facilitate some of the public forum.
Right, I'm Ben Smith, planner with North Star Planning, and I'm here to help with the meeting this evening and some of the facilitation as we get into the public comment section.
All right. So I think the first thing we wanted to kind of cover tonight with the committee is what the committee was charged with. So I think many of us are probably aware, but just so we're all clear, the purpose of the Mineral Extraction Committee was to review the town of Wyndham zoning map and regulations regarding mineral extraction operations and make recommendations and changes to the map and regulations to where various types of mineral extraction operations should be conducted and under what conditions and standards. We were charged with, there was 3 main tasks. One was to review zoning and regulations. The second was to seek input and recommendations from experts. So we've had input testimony from 3 folks at the Maine DEP, Mark Stebbins, Eric Cluck, and John Hopek. And Amanda, if you want to give what their titles were.
Mark's the director of the land division at DEP that does permitting for stormwater, site law, and gravel pits and quarries. Eric is the mining coordinator that reviews permits for gravel pits and quarries. And John Hopek's a hydrogeologist that does various levels of review for different types of those 3 types of land use permitting and how those projects may affect groundwater.
And I think the final item for the committee review was just to collect public input, so that's why we're here tonight. So I think the next item on our agenda tonight is to review what the proposed changes to the ordinance are, and I think I'll turn over to Amanda to dive into that.
Yeah, just as kind of a point of information is that this is some draft language that the committee's been working on since they were appointed a few months ago. I think their first meeting was at the end of June, and they've been meeting mostly weekly to kind of fulfill the tasks of the charge to make a recommendation to the council on some ordinance changes. This public input that we're receiving tonight the committee could be using to revise this proposal that's here tonight. Then ultimately the committee will make a recommendation to the council, and the process to change the land use ordinance is to refer those changes to the planning board. The planning board has a public hearing, so another opportunity for some public input. The planning board makes a recommendation back to the council. Council holds a public hearing, and if they ultimately decide to adopt any changes, then they're effective shortly thereafter. So just kind of a brief history of where we started. The committee kind of went over some of this just to kind of put ourselves in kind of what is the regulatory framework for dealing with mineral extraction in Wyndham. Wyndham's had a gravel pit ordinance since 1971. There's been minor changes over the year. The most significant ones were in 1995 and 2010. Mineral extraction is allowed in nearly all zoning districts in town except C2, C3, the commercial areas, the village commercial in South Wyndham, and in the Aquifer Protection Overlay A around Chapin Pond. Planning board approval is required for the removal of more than 200 yards of material in a year, and site plan review is required when more than 25,000 square feet is to be developed. Site plan review is just some additional standards on top of the rules that regulate mineral extraction. Additionally, mineral extraction can be permitted by DEP for gravel pits that are over 5 acres in size and quarries that are over an acre. So this committee's approach was an attempt to bring the town ordinances more in line with the state laws and rules. And there are a couple places of the draft that's before you where we're proposing standards that are more restrictive than the state's. So the changes to the rules will apply to mineral extraction are townwide. And they're in 2 places in our land use ordinance, the section 600 and section 800. And there's a copy of the proposed ordinance if you didn't see it at the back of the room. So what we're proposing are rules that apply to how mineral extraction would operate. There are right now no changes proposed to where mineral extraction would be allowed. So I was just planning to kind of briefly walk through that little packet that's behind you just to touch on the big areas. In the mineral extraction ordinance, section 600, there are a bunch of new performance standards. These are sort of the big picture topic items where the state has standards. So there's, I'm not going to kind of get into the details of each section. We can maybe deal with some specific, if there's questions in understanding what it means in the public input section, but there's some changes, some standards related to solid waste and how wood waste and land clearing is handled within a mineral extraction area. There's performance standards for groundwater protection related to drinking water wells and setbacks from operations from drinking water wells, both private and public. How fueling of equipment on the site is handled and storage of that fuel, and there's standards for some separations from the excavation from the seasonal high water table. The significant change here is that to be in line with the DEP standards, we're changing our separation from 2 feet that's in the current ordinance above the seasonal high water table to 5 feet. That can be reduced to allow excavation within the groundwater table if the state DEP grants a variance for that activity. It would also need to be approved by the planning board as part of that project's application. There's standards on buffers, like the amount of trees that vegetation that needs to be retained in these buffers. There's standards for setbacks from natural resources, wetlands and streams and other water bodies, roads, both public and private, and property boundaries. Other performance standards are related to erosion control and stormwater management. They're now specifically referenced in our mineral extraction ordinance, but they already were in existence in our site plan review ordinance. We proposed standards for traffic. One of the big changes here that is not something that the state deals with as traffic. Their standards really only relate to high volume, over 100 trips per hour that requires a permit from DOT. In this draft proposal, we would not allow mineral extraction operations on private roads that serve more than 100 dwelling units. There's noise standards and dust standards that are new. The more restrictive dust standards relate to requirements for paving an access drive 100 feet from where it intersects with the road, and standards for covering loaded trucks so that material isn't flying off and causing issues during transport. There's also standards for blasting, and where we're more restrictive is in limiting the timing for this kind of production blasting to only be between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. And we've also added some additional notification requirements that specifically will say that the operator needs to notify the code office, the fire department, and any abutters and anyone else that requests to be notified. We've added requirements for annual inspections from the code enforcement officer to enforce that a project is in compliance with everything that's been approved by the planning board. Mineral site plan applications and mineral extraction operations currently require performance standards. That means that the town holds money for things that are important to complete during the construction of a project. And for mineral extraction, it means that the town's holding a bond so that when that is intended to cover the cost to reclaim a gravel pit or a quarry, so that if an operator walks away from their site and it's a mess, the town has the funds that they can take and clean up the property. We've added a requirement that that guarantee needs to include an amount to replace a private drinking water well if it's impacted by an operation. In our site plan review ordinance, section 800 of our land use ordinance, we've added a specific requirement in the application process for the board. The planning board couldn't approve a new site plan application if a violation exists for that applicant anywhere in the town of Windham. This language is in here, so it wouldn't just apply to mineral extraction, it would apply to any site plan application across town. We've added some additional language to the traffic performance standard section that says that private ways must be improved to the applicable street standard to the closest public street. So that leaves some flexibility to the planning board to determine if that would be a local public street or a commercial industrial road standard. All of those road standards are listed elsewhere in the ordinance in Appendix B specifically. And the last change that's recommended in Section 800 is requirements for mineral extraction to have their stormwater infrastructure inspected annually by a certified individual, and those reports sent annually to the town. So that's kind of the end of the big picture item. So I think looking back at the task, we're looking for some public input on these proposed changes, and certainly, you know, if you have other general comments related to mineral extraction in town. I think we did not come to a consensus about, you know, prohibiting it or changing where mineral extraction can occur anywhere in town. So we certainly would welcome those comments as well. I think, again, to reiterate, though, that this is a discussion about townwide mineral extraction operations, and the committee is not focused on any specific project. So if that is what you're intending to comment on, it's not something really that the Mineral Extraction Committee can focus on in making a recommendation to the council.
Excuse me, can you please use your microphone for
Oh, it's on. It might not just be turned up in this room. And
really close to your mouth.
Okay. Well, I'm done talking. So.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess well,
All right.
lesson learned.
All right, so I think at this point we're going to open it up to public comment. I think Ben's here to help facilitate tonight. Ben, do you want to start and jump right into ground rules of what we're expecting tonight? And I think you'll cover it, but we're here tonight. We're expecting to hear from you. I don't think we're planning a huge back and forth. If there's specific questions, we're happy to have Amanda to answer anything around the zoning, and then we'll save some time at the end for some response then.
Right. Yep. Thank you very much. My name again is Ben Smith. I'm with North Star Planning, and I think the idea tonight was to provide a bit of an overview on what some of the proposed changes are. And I see a number of you were kind of following along as Amanda walked through some of those. There's copies in the back of the room. If you have specific comments or questions about those, certainly step up and use the microphone. We had a short conversation before the meeting started. I don't think we need to set a time limit for speakers. You know, there's a lot of people in the room tonight, and we want to give everybody a chance to speak. I can be the timekeeper, but I don't think we need it. I think if you want to just kind of second a comment that someone had made earlier, you can acknowledge that, but we don't need to spend the whole night talking about traffic if everybody's concerned about traffic. We'll just make some notes of that. I'm going to plug my computer in a minute and keep notes. You'll be able to see that up on the screen. And we will have just kind of one person at a time come up to the microphone. You don't need to be formally recognized, but just kind of take turns in an orderly fashion. And if we need some traffic control, we can do that. But I think that with the people we have in the room and the kinds of things we're looking to do, we can just manage that. And then to echo a point that Drew had made, the idea was to give a bit of an overview. We want to hear from folks, get an understanding of what the questions are about the proposed standards, if there's concerns with the proposed standards or things that are not in the standards. We'll be keeping good track of that, and we're going to try and leave some time at the end of the meeting to answer some of the basic ones, recognizing some of this stuff is going to need to go back to the committee, and they'll need to work on that outside of tonight's session. So our goal, once again, is to collect as much as we can from folks tonight, hear where some of the common themes emerge, and try and get a better sense of what is going to be important when it comes to mineral extraction activities throughout the town. So with that being said, I think we can just open it up to comments, and I will plug in my computer up top.
Ben, when you guys come up, can you just give us your name and where you live, so when we put it in the minutes, we'll know, you know, questions, comments, concerns, all that.
So, we want to hear about the podium.
Or
So we have a podium, but I would move it to the center. But if people are comfortable just sitting up front, I won't kind of block people's view if that works for you.
Go ahead and start it.
Hey folks. Good evening. My name's Ted Nye. You've all seen me for the last couple months. I live on Forest Lake in Gray. I'm a trustee of the Forest Lake Association, and I'm chair of the Civic Affairs Committee for that organization. First of all, I'd like to thank you folks for the time and energy you put into doing this to try to establish some town-wide reform. We are pretty much in agreement with the principles, in principle, with the adjustments that you're proposing, and we're especially in agreement with those relating to public safety and quality of life issues. As you know, I've been to most of the committee meetings, and I don't really recall any mention of property value loss to neighbors of new extraction operations, or much talk about zoning changes in the discussions. One of the speakers who follows me will detail residential property value decline that would be more of a loss to property tax collections than any increase that would be seen from a tax base brought on by extraction operations. Zoning change in areas now in farm zoning that are in threatened lake watersheds and have sizable residential development also needs to be considered. These areas should be rezoned to possibly residential, and new mineral extraction should not be allowed, especially in areas where high housing concentration exists. We feel these are important factors in the discussion and also should be addressed in the committee recommendations. A few of the speakers following me will touch on some of these issues, as well as those of water quality, the aquifer, and the Forest Lake watershed. They'll also speak about some of the potential loopholes in the proposals that we feel need to be addressed. I'll be followed by Rick Irving, who will talk about some of the issues surrounding the proposed quarry on our lake neighborhood. Once again, thanks for your time and your attention.
Good evening. My name is Rick Irving, and again, I'd like to thank you all for all of your hard work and time spent on these issues. My wife and I are Forest Lake residents. Our lake association has tried their best to keep our Forest Lake residents as informed as possible. However, we'd like to take a few minutes here to review some pertinent facts we've collected. We know there are more than 400 residence owners around Forest Lake. There are 145 residences in Windham alone on Lakeside Drive, Forest Avenue, Glendale, Jamesway, Brucey Road, Atlantic, and Cypress Hill Road. All these folks are use Lakeside Drive for access. The largest bus stop in Windham is for some 65 children, is located at the end of Goose Pond Road by the entrance to Lakeside Drive. Many of these Windham residences are within a stone's throw of the proposed quarry off Lakeside Drive, which you see in red there. We know per the developer's proposal, the quarry project located southwest of Forest Lake is about 151 acres. With all the required state and local setbacks applied, including those for the wetland and stream on the west side, the mineable area is estimated at 97 acres, which is the area shown in this next drawing, which they provided in yellow. Per the developer's proposal, oh, they know this, yes, right. So this is really for you. Per the proposal, the quarry site varies in elevation from plus 325 feet to 475 feet above sea level. It states the ledge, which is mineable rock, is expected within 5 to 10 feet of the surface ground, within 20 to 25 feet of the lower eastern portion of the site, which is at plus 325 feet. That puts groundwater at about plus 300 feet. Forest Lake in blue is at 275. The state requires a 5-foot separation above the seasonal high groundwater table for all extraction operations. So the allowed mineable depth varies from 20 feet, possibly up to 170 feet on the west side. To better understand what 170 feet looks like, this is a photo of the Franklin Towers. It's the tallest building in Portland. It's 175 feet high and 16 stories tall. It is also 225 feet wide. To also better understand the size of the proposed quarry itself, which is about 3,600 feet across, 16 Franklin Towers widths would fit end to end from one side to the end, from the left to the right edge of the site, so from the south to the north. It's a big site, right? Okay. So we know actually tonight. Thank you, Amanda, for bringing for updating us, because I didn't know that. But per the new ordinance, not the proposal. The proposal talked about operating hours from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. But with the new ordinance, the hours of operation would be from 11 to 4, correct?
That's just blasting.
That's blasting.
Right.
Okay.
Hours of operation are not specified in the ordinance. The ordinance instructs the applicant to include what the proposed hours of operation are, and the planning board has the opportunity to impose conditions of approval on limiting those hours of operation.
Okay, so I'll just report on what the proposal said. The proposal said the hours of operation would be from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. with anticipated truck trips driving off-site never to exceed 50 trucks per any peak hour. Take an hour off for lunch, and there would be up to maybe 600 trips per day max. Keep in mind, one trip is both coming and going from the site. We know the proposed open pit quarry is both vastly out of scale and environmentally out of place with the residential lake community which it lies within. We know the proposed quarry lays at the center of Forest Lake watershed with two streams directly adjacent to the site, which drain directly into the Forest Lake. We know there is a large aquifer downstream of the proposed quarry, both in Windham and Cumberland. Many of the Forest Lake residents have wells which dip into the groundwater, which is downhill from this quarry. Having contacted a reputable environmental engineering firm for advice, we know the following. The 100 acres, which have already been clear-cut, should be subject to stormwater management and erosion control regulations. We know the current quarry proposal is a sketch submission, eventually a groundwater study, a traffic study, a rehabilitation plan, a wetland survey, environmental impact report, performance bond, among other requirements would need to be submitted for the city and public review. We know for our Forest Lake community, we are concerned for the environmental and safety issues, the quality of our lake and groundwaters, and of course our property values. I'll now turn it over to Janine and Paula to talk about Forest Lake water quality. Thank you.
May I just put that, please?
Yeah, so she wanted to use the,
Just for a minute.
she needed the, yeah.
Yes.
That one.
Now, good evening. My name is Janine Gorm. I'm president of the Forest Lake Association. And again, thank you for all your hard work. We appreciate it, and also your concern to your patience to listen to our concerns, rather. Let's take a minute here. This applies to Forest Lake, but also any of the lakes in the watershed in Windham. The things that I'm going to speak about, but Forest Lake specifically has been active in monitoring the health of the lake and watershed for the past about 30 to 40 years. And here are some of the things that we do as a lake community. We conduct a watershed survey in the late 1980s, 2003, and 2017 to identify areas of erosions from the unvegetated bare soil that contributes to the phosphorus levels in the water. The 2017 survey identified the dirt camp roads as having the highest impact on water quality from runoff into the lake. 5 of these sites are on or near the Lakeside Drive James Way intersection and directly adjacent to the road of the proposed quarry. So this is from the DEP and Cumberland County Soil and Water that plotted this out for us, all the high impact sites. And you can see this is Forest Lake would be on your right, and then this is Lakeside Drive if you see the red triangles. And you can see that those are very high impact sites, and those are directly adjacent to the pit, and also the road that's been placed in there for entrance to the potential quarry is right at the bottom of that. Additionally, all the lakes in the watershed have certified water quality monitors. We do checks on water clarity, dissolved oxygen, phosphorus, pH, and alkalinity every 2 weeks from May to October. Forest Lake is considered above average on clarity, and other indicators compared to the state of Maine. So these are just, if you look, the little yellow circle, which you cannot see, I'm sure, is where Forest Lake sits. So left is good, and right on the graph is poor, bad. So you can see Forest Lake is better than average for most of the other lakes in Maine. In addition, every August, a team of certified invasive plant controllers do a comprehensive lake search for invasive plants, and Forest Lake has none, thankfully. These certifications all require classes provided by the Lake Stewards of Maine. So it's just to show that people are giving a lot of time and energy out of their own lives to do this volunteer monitoring. We continue to communicate with the towns of Gray, Cumberland, and Windham on the results of our watershed surveys and what the plans are to correct some of these things. And we also provide education to homeowners on safe waterfront practices. Currently, the road associations on James Way and Lakeside Drive are working with Cumberland County Soil and Water to improve some of these aforementioned roads of the high impact sites. Over the past 40 years, residents of this lake and watershed have worked diligently to preserve this treasure that we are blessed to live near. Quickly, I just wanted you to show some of the pictures of the way the road was left after the developer clear-cut the trees along the road. So in conclusion, we are very saddened and angry at this proposal, an example of what we may face in the future.
Can you be clear? Are you angry about the proposed quarry or
Both.
the proposed?
Both.
Okay.
I'm not quite done yet. An example of what we may face in the future is the way the road has been left. So the clear cutting was done in March. None of us had any idea what was going on, and none of us knew what the plan was. So you can see the ditches are completely filled with slash. Here's another instance. The creek is pretty much obstructed. And there's another, that should be a ditch along there, but you can see it's completely filled because so the water doesn't run into the ditch, it runs on the other side towards the lake. And this is just a beautiful little swamp in here to the left. And you can see that the majority of what was cut has been left along the road. Thank you for your time.
Hi. First of all, thank you again for allowing us to speak tonight. My name is Paula Curcio. I'm a Gray resident of Forest Lake. I'm a trustee of the Forest Lake Association, and I'm also a certified lake quality monitor for the Lake Stewards of Maine. We've been testing the water quality for decades in conjunction with Lake Stewards of Maine. You might also know that program, formerly known as the Maine Volunteer Lake Monitoring Program. Using Secchi discs, readings, oxygen sensors, and pH and alkaline readings, as Janine mentioned. A Secchi disc, for those of you who aren't aware, is an 8-inch disc with alternating black and white quadrants, and we lower it into the deepest part of the lake until it can no longer be seen. And this depth of disappearance is a measure of the transparency or clarity of the water. And we do this every 2 weeks in the season. Transparency is an indicator of the impact of human activity on the land surrounding the lake. When transparency is measured through the season and from year to year, we can observe trends in transparency. Transparency can serve as an early warning that activities on the land are having an effect on a lake. Therefore, it's a direct indicator of phosphorus levels getting too high for the health of the lake. On Forest Lake, our pH and alkaline readings have remained consistent for years, but phosphorus continues to impact Forest Lake and all lakes. And I do want you to note that, fortunately for us on Forest Lake, geese and septic issues are currently ruled out as contaminants of Forest Lake. So our real big issue is phosphorus coming from outside. Therefore, quarrying in the Forest Lake watershed will most certainly affect our diligent efforts to keep this fragile lake healthy. An article in Nature Conservancy discusses the importance of a watershed to protect the quality of the surrounding streams, lakes, and wetlands. It states, quote, "Watersheds sustain life in more ways than one. According to the EPA, more than $450 billion in food, fiber, manufactured goods, and tourism depend on clean, healthy watersheds. That's why proper watershed protection is necessary to you and your community. Watershed protection is a means of protecting a lake, river, or stream by managing the entire watershed that drains into it. Clean, healthy watersheds depend on an informed public to make the right decisions when it comes to the environment and actions made by the community." Unquote. So please remember that your zoning regulations will have a far-reaching impact on the communities surrounding Windham and Forest Lake, and I hope you consider this. Allowing quarries in residential areas near fragile lakes, ecosystems, and in watersheds run too high an environmental risk. Thank you.
Is someone else going to follow up with zoning to that? Do you have recommendations to the zoning changes you'd like to see?
Somebody's going to speak on it. I can't tell you exactly what it is.
Okay, just checking.
We don't want to get you sick.
My name is Kevin Clark. I live on James Way. I just want to thank you guys for volunteering your time for something as fun as mineral extraction. Mr. Mayo, can you actually read the purpose of the committee again?
I'm going to read the whole thing again?
Just the first thing that they should be focusing on.
Let's see. The purpose of the Mineral Extraction Committee shall be to review the town of Windham zoning map and regulations regarding mineral extraction operations.
So, what some of my concern is you guys, not we, have been meeting since June, and if I'm understanding this correctly, there is no changes to proposed zoning. So it's kind of frustrating. Imagine your boss giving you a task to go do something, and you come here to propose the changes, and there is no change to the number one thing that you guys should be focusing on. That goes for this entire committee here. So some of my frustration with zoning is there is no changes to zoning. There is a proposal to not allow a business such as a mineral extraction along a house or a road that has 100 homes. But what if it's next to 100 homes? What I mean by that is, let's say you're literally right against homeowners, against 100 homes, but you're not on a road that directly touches those. So it's the same kind of issue, except without the traffic. You still have some of the dangers with it, the silica dust, some of the fly rock, everything that we've experienced here in this town. What I've done here is I've pulled some of the tax records for a few similar businesses off of Bedrock Terrace, Enterprise Drive, Varney Mill Road, Aggregate Ave, and Nash Road. And I looked at the average taxes paid by these businesses for their property here, and it's only about $7,200 on average. If you look at an area, let's say Atlantic Drive, Brewski Road, Glendale, James Way, Lakeside, and other properties to be named Brewski Road, they pay a total of $315,000 a year in taxes, significantly more than what some of these businesses pay, which is only about $36,000. So if these roads saw a decrease of about 20%, it's about $63,000 a year. That's 9 times the average that a business like this pulls in. 30%, $94,000. That $94,000 is not even 1/10 of the cost that lakes like Belgrade, some of the Belgrade lakes are paying to fix their lakes. So in a town that's struggling to pay for things like some new buildings they have, how would we feel about losing about $100,000 a year? To put that in perspective, if we had another pit, let's say on 100 plus acres, come in, we might see a total of $36,000 gained in 5 years. We can also lose $473,000. So not only are we not really taking into account the zoning and what makes most sense economically, environmentally, but we're not even looking at what if part of this business is touching another town. Are we going to be notifying those residents in other towns of blasting? Are they going to also have the same kind of benefits of well checks and guarantees? I don't see any of this in here. So not only do we need to go back and revisit the number one thing that this committee should have been doing, which is focusing on zoning to find out where it's economically friendly, environmentally friendly, and just generally where does it make sense. I don't see any of that in here. What I'd also like to see is us put a little more focus on how do we get around this, waivers. So I randomly attended a meeting that wasn't tied to mineral extraction, but at that time there was a quarry in this town trying to seek a waiver to go underneath the water table, just like that. Planning board approved it. So what is going to stop the planning board from approving things that we're setting up here, waivers for that, variances? There's no studies to find out if there's anything bad for the environment here. We haven't had any hydrogeologists come in to speak. From my understanding, many of the facts that were brought up during the committees kind of got shot down as not facts, and I want us to revisit that and look at that. But I think there really should be more focus on zoning, on proposing where quarries should not be. Shouldn't just be on a road that has 100 houses, but it may be a vicinity with 100 houses. We should also think about the financial impacts, what really makes sense for this town financially. Kind of just go back to the drawing board and kind of try to dig into it a little bit more. Thank you.
You mentioned some very specific
yes.
roads. Can you send those to Amanda so we have them for the record?
And for the record, I wouldn't mind receiving some of the. I think we have over 10 quarries in this town. If I knew the addresses and the lots and stuff, I could really revamp some of this analysis here. But if you guys want, I can send it in Excel. I brought some more copies here. But
thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Dennis Brown. I live on Highland Lake. I was at we had a Highland Lake Association meeting downstairs, and I knew this was coming on, but as I was walking up, one of the things that I noticed that really relates to the zoning question that was asked earlier is that if you look at the series of zoning maps downstairs in the hallway, and they do it for about every 10 years or so, you can see that if you look at the lakes, and I look specifically at Forest Lake because that's where obviously much of this discussion is centered around, the neighborhoods have changed dramatically. And I don't know when the last time there was a review of the zoning in those kinds of areas, but what used to be okay maybe is farm or farm and residential. Times change, and as the density of residential housing changes in some of these communities, in small communities, I think it warrants a review of what the zoning should be in those kinds of areas. In farm zoning, I mean, obviously, right next to a lake like that, would that be a good place to put in a pig farm? Probably not. Because Highland Lake is split between Windham and Falmouth, I looked at Falmouth. They actually have a Highland Lake overlay zone. It's far more restrictive than what the farm zoning would be. So I think it's something that the committee should take a strong look at. Every great pond, and that's a pond or a lake of over 10 acres in Windham, is on this DEP's list of lakes most at risk of new development, and that's pretty significant. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of them self-inflicted, some of them lack of ordinance. The town was great in approving some phosphorus regulations last January for Highland Lake, but not for other water bodies around. But there's only a small number of resources in town. And there's a lot of money that comes into the town of Windham because of those resources, as the prior speaker just said. I highly encourage you to revisit the zoning and look at what Wyndham did. I think there's some real value in recognizing the changing environment that the properties around lakes have experienced, and you can see that on your way out just walking past those prints on the wall. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jennifer Kapovich. I live at 55 Lakeside Drive in Wyndham. Thank you for working as a committee to look at mineral extraction in our town. I am a Wyndham mom. My children and their friends play in our yards. They explore the forested areas in our neighborhood. They build fairy houses and tree forts, and they ride mountain bikes. They find salamanders in the stream, and they walk the dogs. And they stroll up to the store for an ice cream. Right now, over 85 children enjoy the treasure of our safe neighborhood and freedom with nature that is not common in many parts of America. This is one of the main reasons I chose to live in Wyndham, in a rural area. I want my children to be outside. I'm sure every mom in Wyndham has some worries, but they are not facing the worries of a quarry. The safety of their children near a quarry, the quality of life with children near a quarry. It is a fact that quarries are not safe places. Compromised air quality, earth-shaking vibrations, large noisy equipment, 26 tons of gravel plus the truck many times each day, fuel hazards, and especially blasting are all known and documented dangers of a quarry. You don't need a specialist or a scientist or hard facts to tell you the common sense dangers of explosions, mineral extraction, and processing. It is a fact that in the state of Maine there have been instances of fly rock destroying property of residents. I fear that all the hazards of a quarry will change our quality of life, and especially the thought of an errant rock hitting an innocent child who is on their own yard and their own property. I don't want to be on guard for the alarms and the warnings of a blast and then have to gather my children and move them to safety just in case. Like every other mother in any part of this town, I want my children to be safe, whether it be walking home from the bus stop or playing with friends outside. New quarries near residential areas should not be permitted. They are not safe and should not be located near homes in Wyndham. This committee, for over 8 weeks now, should have taken a close look at zoning maps. The zoning should be analyzed thoroughly for such a dangerous and environmentally destructive operation that will affect our safety and quality of life. I ask you to review the comprehensive town plan and take note of the large undeveloped habitat block of land that is proposed to be a quarry. Consider saving a significant wildlife habitat area. Look at rural area land use and make changes to save the iconic parts of Wyndham. I am speaking for any parent in this town who could have a future quarry near their home. Our area and others like it should be rezoned with no permitted use of mineral extraction. Thank you for listening.
Good evening, my name is Brianna and I'm a Wyndham resident. I just want to talk about the importance of groundwater and aquifers and how zoning should be changed to protect these natural resources. Wyndham has farm zones around multiple lakes on the DEP's threatened lakes list, including Highland Lake and Forest Lake. As you know, mineral extractions are allowed in these heavily populated areas. Did you know that runoff from farms is the leading source of impairments to rivers and lakes? The EPA's website states fertilizers and animal manure, which are both rich in nitrogen and phosphorus, are the primary sources of nutrient pollution from agricultural sources. Excess nutrients can impact water quality when it rains or when water and soil containing nitrogen and phosphorus wash into nearby waters or leach into groundwater. This can cause algae blooms, remove oxygen from water, which can kill fish, and put high concentrations of nitrates into drinking water. High nitrates can also be fatal to infants. Forest Lake is the recharge area for the West Cumberland Aquifer, which is one of the largest in southern Maine. CV and Mahar engineers did a report for Cumberland and stated, the sand and gravel aquifer is largely exposed at the ground surface and receives direct precipitation, which passes through the soils and enters the water table. Because the sand and gravel is exposed at the ground surface, any spills, chemicals, or fuels will migrate quickly down to the water table and can pollute the groundwater. Unfortunately, once the aquifer is polluted, it may take decades or maybe even centuries to renovate the aquifer groundwater to a drinkable status. Groundwater contamination has occurred in the past from pits, and a few examples are, in 1983 on Blackstrap Road in Cumberland, residents reported poor-tasting drinking water. The DEP found high levels of PCE in the water, which is a carcinogen. The list of potential sources was narrowed down to the Hutchins gravel pit, the Maine Department of Transportation pit, and former spraying of waste oil for dust control off of Goose Pond Road and Forest Lake Road. When the DEP spoke to the committee, they mentioned that groundwater contamination had also occurred in 2007 in Windham, New Hampshire, from a pit where Meadowcroft used nitrogen-based explosives for rock blasting, and the nitrates leached into the groundwater and contaminated residents' wells. I also found another instance in Westford, Mass., where Maine Drilling and Blasting paid $1 million to clean up the town's water supply due to contamination from blasting at the granite quarries in the town. The contamination was discovered in 2004 and had contaminated their aquifer, and as of 2016, the perchlorate contamination was still being monitored. In the long run, it's less expensive and more protective of public health to prevent contamination than it is to treat water once it's been contaminated. Thank you for your efforts and your time.
Lake girl. In 1936, my grandfather built a camp on Forest Lake.
Can I just get your name real quick?
You will.
Okay.
In 1936, my grandfather built a camp on Forest Lake. His name was Val Legue. In 1957, my father purchased a camp on Forest Lake. His name is Val Legue. And since 2000, my husband and I are camp owners on Forest Lake, and my name is Val Legue. I have been on this lake for 60 years, and as you can see by this photograph, I've had the same hairstyle for 60 years. For those of you who are not familiar with Forest Lake, please let me paint a picture. We are a hard-working bunch. We are not a gated community. Forest Lake is a small, beautiful lake. We don't hire people to do our work. We do it ourselves. Everyone pitches in. We are a safe, healthy family lake. When a boat passes by, we wave. When a boat needs rescue, we come out and help that boat. When we have problems, we come together to resolve it. That's why we're here tonight. Here is some insight into our lake past. In the 1940s, a loosely formed group headed up lake issues. In 1964, the Forest Lake Association was formed. The first dam was built in the 20s, then reconstructed in 38 and 64. Finally, in 1974, we got a concrete dam. In the 60s, when we needed a new dam, we sponsored bean suppers, auctions, and dances to raise money. In those days, B&M would donate beans and brown bread for fundraisers. They generously donated to us for years. We want you to know we are stewards of the environment, and the thing about calling oneself a steward is you actually have to do something, not just say it. You need to have a track record. Over the last 20 years, our lake health has been an obsession for many of our lake dwellers. It's healthier now than I ever remember. In 1971, we started our first lake testing. In In 79, we got a $25,000 grant to work on septic issues. In 1980, our lake was stocked with 500 brook trout. We no longer need that service. In the 1980s, Bill Spitzinger was one of our first lake quality testers. The efforts heated up in the 1990s. The 2000s started a heavy dose of education and land management. We resolved many erosion, watershed, and septic system issues with chronicled results, and the lake even survived a milfoil outbreak. Ed Keenan, who's here tonight, actually built a glass-bottom boat to check water quality. Even our camp now has a series of French drains to mitigate erosion. Seasonal water testing confirms our lake is healthy. Our status of threatened lake is due to potential development, not actual results. We are a family lake, and we are a lake family. This year marks 20 consecutive years of hosting loons on our lake. And as you know, loons are a sign of lake health. We want it to stay that way. We ask Windham to join us in our continued efforts to keep our lake safe and healthy. Please remember, not every superhero wears a cape. Sometimes they wear fleece and flannel. Thank you.
What's your name?
Hi, Tina LeBlanc. I also live in Windham. I'm a concerned resident who has joined efforts with some of the concerned residents, and I'm probably not too close to this, about the mineral extraction operations here in Windham. We met with, well, you had mentioned that you had talked to some experts considering mineral extractions from DEP. You had hydrogeologists, you had DEP representatives. I was at that meeting as well and observed that whole meeting. We decided that we wanted to find out more information on our own too. So we met with a professor at the St. Joseph's College, and I believe you guys received some of this literature today. I just noticed, I didn't realize you were going to get it this quickly, so I'm glad to see that. But I'd like to, if you may, if I could read that letter. This letter is from Dr. Emily Lesher from St. Joseph's College, who is a professor of the sciences, and she met with us and discussed about the quarry and its potential impacts on the environment. So if I could I read that letter? Okay, awesome. She wrote to the town council and said, I am writing with some comments regarding the proposed mineral extraction near Forest Lake. I'm an assistant professor of the chemistry at St. Joseph's College and was asked by some concerned residents of the Forest Lake Association for help in better understanding some of the environmental and health risks associated with the proposed project. A bit more of my background for context. I have a long history of studying and involvement with issues of water quality, mining impacts on water systems, and engaging with the community on these issues. My PhD is in environmental science and engineering, and she attended the Colorado School of Mines, and she also submitted some qualifications along with that on your email. I met with members of the Forest Lake Association on August 30th to hear more about their concerns and give them my thoughts on the level of risk associated with the project. I share many of the concerns of the group, and I encourage the City Council and its committees to be cautious with regards to the development for a number of reasons, and she spelled that out. 1. Moving water and sediment transport. Water needs to leave the proposed site one way or another, and every mineral extraction operation results in increased surface area of rock that was previously very geochemically stable. That increased surface area then interacts with air and water, which can result in mobilization of trace elements, as well as a generation of large amounts of particles and rubble of all sizes, from very fine dust to cobbles and boulders. This presents a few potential risks to Forest Lake and the Cumberland Aquifer, as discussed earlier. And that's spelled out as storms and drainage patterns may result in overflow overland flow transporting fine material to the lake. I was informed the developers had said the site is internally drained, so this might be a smaller issue, but I'm concerned, that the site is seeking a waiver, which was discussed earlier, which it seems like they can get waivers pretty frequently, from the stormwater management plan. Given the proximity to the lake, I think this is imperative to have a robust stormwater management plan to prevent movement of turbid waters into the lake. The suspended particles can transport nutrients like phosphorus to the lake, and increases in turbidity, which I know we talked about that earlier, about the turbidity of the water, are harmful to aquatic life. A waiver should not be considered. An internally drained site means water that moves through the site continues to groundwater aquifers. I have not seen any hydrogeology reports on the site, but my assumption, given the proximity of the site to Forest Lake, which feeds the Cumberland Aquifer, would be that internally drained water would be entering the aquifer, quite possibly impacting the Forest Lake residents' wells. Has there been any analysis of trace metals in the rocks units that are proposed to be quarried? And that's a concern too, that these quarries that are being proposed should have analysis done prior to. That's my saying. I would very much want to know about the possibility of quarrying, mobilizing trace elements, particularly arsenic and uranium, given that the aquifer is a drinking water source for so many people. I am unsure how the aquifer protection boundary has been defined. Since Forest Lake feeds Cumberland Aquifer, it's illogical for the aquifer protection boundary to only extend some small distance from the lakeshore. It would make much more sense from a hydrologic point of view to include Forest Lake's watershed, since the watershed, lake, and aquifer appear to be hydrogeologically continuous. 2. Infrastructure degradation. Moving massive amounts of rocks off the site requires quite a bit of trucking, and the road servicing the site is quite narrow and not in great shape. I worry that the heavy uses of the road by heavy trucks will result in degradation of the road and further runoff issues to the lake. I'm aware there was also a waiver requested for traffic management. I think this is an issue that must be dealt with and not circumvented. And dust and pollution. Although this is outside my area of expertise, I would be concerned about the health impacts of the dust and the noise if I lived around Forest Lake. I hope my comments are helpful, and please let me know if I can be of further assistance. In closing, and this was just mainly to educate ourselves because, we really wanted to hear more about the scientific details of this. And in closing, I would recommend that you implement an aquifer protection overlay for all the watersheds to exist with all the watersheds of all the Great Lakes, because Windham is all about our lakes, and we want to protect these lakes, and we want to protect the residents around the lakes and the wells. So I would recommend that. And I would recommend looking at the zoning in the close proximity of the houses and the wells. Internally drained sounds great, but it has to go somewhere. The water has to go somewhere. So please consider protecting all of us. Thank you.
Hi, Kathy. Hello, I'm Ann Sparling. I live at Forest Lake. I did have comments, but firstly, I would like to share some information that Denise Tangway, also of Forest Lake in Windham, has taken the time to put together. And this is on the subject of silica, which is like this mysterious substance that nobody seems to know much about, in my opinion. So if I may read what Denise has thoughtfully put together for us. The subject of silica has been brought up in some of the meetings before and has been dismissed because it was incorrectly thought to not become airborne and stay within a job site. However, through Denise's extensive research, she's found many documents and statements by OSHA, DEP, EPA, American Lung Association, and others that indicate differently. Let me tell you, if you care about this town, the people, the lakes, the streams, and the wildlife, you should be concerned too. Note, silica dust is a known carcinogen. It causes many devastating health illnesses, including lung cancer, silicosis, COPD, asthma, bronchitis, emphysema, kidney disease, and yes, premature death. Silica dust is one of the most dangerous dusts you can breathe. Silica is a natural mineral found in granite and other sources. As one of our DEP reps stated in a meeting here in this room, granite is comprised of 30 to 50% silica. Looking at the local geological maps, you'll find that granite is one of Windham's most prominent rocks. Where does it come from? Some sources are quarries, gravel pits, any large development. Silica dust is produced when excavating, drilling, blasting, screening, loading, unloading, hauling on and off site, crushing, and wind blowing over stacked reserve. There are footnotes if anyone wants to read to these comments. Mitigation measures for pits and quarries are often inadequate. Silica dust is 60 times smaller than a grain of salt. So small you can't see it, which is what makes it perfect to stay afloat in the air that we breathe. Pollen can be 12 micrometers. Silica dust is smaller at 2 to 5 micrometers. You can inhale silica even if you don't see the dust. Silica dust is inhaled deep into your lungs and cannot be coughed out. Your body cannot defend against it, causing silicosis, which there is no cure for. Once inside the lungs, the silica dust particles are attacked by the immune system. This causes swelling and gradually leads to areas of hardened and scarred lung tissue, such fibrosis. And contrary to some comments, the silica dust does become airborne, and it does travel, especially downwind from the site. It's been recorded to be at harmful levels as far as a mile away. The exposure to silica dust can be occupational and non-occupational. One study of a sand and gravel facility in California found that 750 meters, almost a half a mile downwind, furthest point monitored at the time, the level of harmful silica dust in the air was twice as high as at an upwind site. It has been recorded to travel 1 to 2 miles in the air and can travel further. A Wisconsin researcher collected 16 air samples at the fence line of a sand mine and a processing plant and found silica dust levels twice the allowable standard. It can float for days to months. In some cases, it's been found in higher concentrations 1,500 yards away from a job site than on the job site itself. Many experts feel that the allowable PM particle matter standards do not go far enough to ensure clean, safe air. Silica dust increases corrosion, damages vegetation. Along with other minerals, it slowly dissolves and then is carried from the watersheds by runoff through the rivers and the streams. Dissolved silica dust contributes to algae blooms. Each year, about over 300 workers die from I don't know how to pronounce it. Blah, blah. From a letter written by the American Lung Association, crystalline silica is serious, and when the pollution source is nearby, the health risk increase. And it can include premature death, heart attacks, asthma attacks. Children and seniors are more vulnerable. Short-term exposure can kill. Peaks or spikes in particle pollution can last for hours to days. Deaths can occur on the very day particle levels are high or within 1 to 2 months afterwards. Particle pollution does not just make people die a few days earlier than they might otherwise. These are deaths that would not have occurred if the air were cleaner. Footnotes. Fine particulate matter from quarry dust is a dangerous pollutant posing serious health risks. I thank Denise for all the time she took. I thank you all for this your time in this committee, and so the job does seem there's going to be some ordinance changes in how Wyndham deals with these types of businesses, and by the amount of reactions and people involvement in the town, not just Forest Lake, but all throughout, I implore those to keep our community safe, and all the other reasons of the impact in life, quality of air, safety of our residents and our children, and all of these things. I sure hope that the town and you all can come up with ordinances that reflect the wishes of the residents, and also reflect the plan of the comprehensive master plan, which directs the town to do and save the wildlife and the open areas, etc., etc. I'll let Andrew expound on that one because he had some good thoughts on that. So thank you very much. Thank you, Denise, for putting that together.
Hi, I'm Andrew Kapovich. I live on 55 Lakeside Drive. And yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the comprehensive master plan for the town of Wyndham. In fact, everything I'm about to say and quote is from this plan, a plan which some of you helped develop. And I may also just say, fantastic job. Very impressive work. When you first look at the plan, the cover page, very first thing you see on that cover page, quote, invest in rural Wyndham to keep it rural. And then the plan details in bold type the quote, the 4 big things. These were things that the planners detailed that are the highest priority for the town of Wyndham. And one of those 4 is, quote, invest in rural Wyndham to keep it rural. Quote from the plan, we need to get serious about open space and preserving land where there will be little left to preserve and protect. There's a page about the future and vision of Wyndham. A quote from that page, identify the most important open space and undeveloped properties and work with owners to permanently protect these areas. There's a list of core values for the plan. Quote, we should preserve important open spaces, forested lands, and working farms. As Wyndham continues to grow and develop, it is imperative that the most important of these areas be preserved for the future. There were several town plan goals in the comprehensive master plan. Quote, identify land for preservation, pursue opportunities to preserve open space and recreational lands, establish a program for preservation of land important to the people of Wyndham, protect critical and important natural resources. Conservation, protection, and acquisition of forested lands, open space, wildlife habitats, water, and natural resources. It's mentioned over 200 times in the Wyndham Comprehensive Plan. There are no goals stated anywhere in the master plan to increase the number of mineral extraction sites in Wyndham, nor to increase development of any type in our forested lands, wildlife habitats, or near our lakes and other natural resources. Another part of the plan has the results from a detailed survey of Wyndham residents, which was conducted by a Portland firm. 97% of Wyndham residents feel that the amount of forested lands and open space in Wyndham is either just right or not enough. 92% agree Wyndham must balance growth of the community while protecting rural character and natural resources. Over 90% agree that maintaining Windham's rural character, protecting open space, and forested lands should be a priority. 81% agree that loss of forested lands and open space are a threat to our quality of life. And amazingly, about 2/3 are actually willing to support a tax increase to finance efforts to acquire, preserve, and or protect undeveloped open space and forested lands. The purpose of this committee was to review the zoning map and regulations in regards to mineral extraction and suggest changes to the map and regulations. But there were virtually no discussions on the zoning map, and you've proposed no changes to it. The committee did not complete its mission. Perhaps it should request another 6 months, and perhaps some or all of the committee members should be allowed to recuse themselves and allow others to take on the task of zoning changes. The Windham Plan and Windham residents have made it clear what should and should not be done with our undeveloped and natural lands. And on this specific issue, as with all town issues, the needs and desires of the many outweigh those of the few or the one. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Kathy. I'm in Cumberland, and I wasn't exactly expecting to say anything tonight, but I feel like Cumberland hasn't really had a chance to voice how they feel, considering that the majority of Goose Pond Road is in Cumberland, and that's where I live, is off Westmore Ave. And I know tonight they've talked that there's been 85 kids on the Windham bus that's at the end of Goose Pond, but no mention of the amount of Cumberland kids getting on and off every day. And our road has 17 houses that are all fairly new, and we have about 29 kids getting on and off, about 6 buses a day. So we have 2 every morning for the elementary and the upperclassmen, and we have 2 in the afternoon, and then we have 2 late buses. So we're talking 6 buses per day just on the Cumberland side. And just to add to the fact that this is a much bigger residential area, not only for Windham, but there's so many Cumberland people that are going to be impacted by this as well. And the fact is if we had known that this development was a possibility, I don't believe that many of us would have chosen this particular area to build our houses or to buy our houses, having it been so recent. And I really feel that the zoning needs to be reevaluated, that this is a residential community now. People want to come here to raise families and enjoy the quality of the outdoor life. And this proposal impacts that adversely 2,000%. And Cumberland is very against this development in our area. So thank you.
I joined Kathy up here because I'm also a resident in the Westmore Avenue neighborhood that is off of Goose Pond Road in Cumberland. My name is Stephanie Cobb. One of the things that really bothered me back at the beginning of one of the proposals for a quarry in the town of Windham was that when the developer presented maps to the town, the planning board had asked that they highlight residencies in the area. And one thing that stood out to me was, yeah, okay, they started highlighting the residencies in Windham, but what about us just over the town line? My property abuts the Windham town line. My house was not on any maps. My house is within a half mile of this proposed site. But there's no mention of that, and there's a reason for that, and I think it's wrong. In going what Andrew was saying before, I have written a statement here. You all may or may not know what the vision statement and mission statement is for the town of Windham, but I got them off of the website, and I'd like to share them both with you and then share some of my comments. So the vision statement for the town of Windham, Maine reads as follows. The government of the town of Windham, Maine will be an example of progressive, prudent, goal-focused, and cost-effective public service, flexible in its response to the changing needs of a growing community. It will be an example of conscientious stewardship of public finances, assets, infrastructure, and the public process. The town's government will foster an environment that encourages civic engagement, openness, transparency, and accountability to contribute to enriching, enlivening, and valuing every community member. So let's talk about openness, transparency, and accountability. It was brought to my attention during the Q&A session with Maine DEP staff that the town only takes into consideration violations that have occurred previously within the town's own limits. In other words, the town will not hear or consider past violations of a developer in neighboring communities or other places outside the town lines of Windham. This astounds me. When I complete a job application, I'm asked to disclose criminal history. When I apply for my pharmacist license from the state, I'm asked if I have any criminal convictions. I'm asked about my past history, no matter where it took place. An individual or entity applying for a permit for a quarry should face similar scrutiny. Openness, transparency, and accountability help ensure quality and safety. If that's the vision for the town, why aren't the developers held to the same vision and standard? The vision statement also conveys the town's government will contribute to enriching, enlivening, and valuing every community member. The dictionary definitions of enrich are 1. Improve or enhance the quality or value of, and 2. Make someone wealthy or wealthier. Does a quarry improve or enhance the quality of the Forest Lake community? No. Does it make the Windham community wealthy? No. In fact, Kevin brought that to our attention, that in fact it will do just the opposite. Property and home values will drop. Property assessments will require review and will result in considerable reductions in taxation. The overall appeal of living in this region of Windham and other surrounding communities will diminish. The dictionary definitions of enliven are as follows. 1. Make something more entertaining, interesting, or appealing. And 2. Make someone more cheerful or animated. Is there anything appealing about a quarry in the Forest Lake watershed? When the developer's team of engineers and experts were asked by a member of the town council if they would like to live next to the proposed quarry, they all said no. Will a quarry make the Forest Lake community more cheerful? Absolutely not. The mission statement for the town of Windham, Maine reads as follows. The mission of the town of Windham, Maine's government, is to provide governance, services, and pursue policies responsive to the needs of its citizens and the public in order to maintain, support, and improve the quality of life in the community. The proposed quarry does not maintain, support, and improve the quality of life in the community. In fact, we are here today because many of Windham's citizens and the general public, including folks from neighboring communities like myself, have expressed grave concerns regarding a decrease in quality of life such a quarry will cause. I ask you to please consider making some zoning changes in certain areas of the town of Windham, and also some changes that I touched on earlier. Thank you, and thank you for your time.
My name is Kirk Jurgelevich. I'm the guy, Kirk Jurgelevich. Legue Jurgelevich. I've been around this lake thousands of times, running, biking, walking.
Kurt, would you mind using the microphone?
Yeah, I've been around this lake 1,000 times, running, biking, walking, rowing, water skiing, wakeboarding, boating, fishing, whatever. These people that have talked tonight, unbelievable. It's just been really good to hear from them. There's one person that we are saving this lake for, and this, could you please stand up? I've seen this little guy bike and walk his dog on this lake. We are saving this lake for that kid right here tonight. You are awesome.
Hi, my name is Joe Curcio. I'm a Gray resident. I want to thank you all for the time you're putting into this. I also happen to be the president of our road association, which is Lakewood Park Road Association. Our road abuts the Wyndham Gray line and goes out to Forest Lake Road. So I have a couple of issues or questions, concerns as I sit here. I think I applaud the support and the number of people that have come to speak tonight, and I think that that's what community is all about. First of all, the first topic is an aquifer. An aquifer is a shared resource. And I look at the details of this new ordinance that you guys are writing, and you talk in fine detail about 100 feet setbacks from water supply. I would beg the question, what's your definition of water supply? My wellhead is not my water supply. My water comes from the aquifer, which is at least 300 feet down in my yard, and I'm pretty confident it comes from water that is underneath the area that we're talking about with this particular quarry. So as you dive into this, I think you have to look at that. You know, these kind of little details saying 5 feet from the high water mark may be relatively short-sighted when you think about the impact that blasting and drilling is going to make on hundreds and hundreds of homes. The other concern I have has to do with your detailed recommendations for the roads. The traffic most likely coming out of this particular proposed quarry most likely will go both ways. It'll travel north and south on the road. When they travel south, they're going to end up crossing over the portion of road that our road association is responsible for. This is a private road managed by only a handful of houses. We only have like 26 members. We work really hard to keep the road in as good of shape as we can so that the town of Gray will plow us. And we've all signed easements for that purpose. This is a private road over private property. So we still retain the right to put restrictions on that property. And I visited with Steve LaValle in the town of Gray. He's the director of transportation. And he told us that we would be legally within our bounds to post the road for 365 days a year to weight restrictions. We just happen to be in the process of writing our new bylaws. I fully intend to put weight restrictions on Cottage Road. Our culverts cannot handle the loading of big trucks on a regular basis. We see degradation of the culverts from the semi-routine delivery vehicles that come over it now. And I look at the sheer number and the sheer weight of the traffic that we're talking about here, and I know that our culverts can't handle it. And the burden of maintaining that road has nothing to do with this developer. It has everything to do with the 26 homeowners that are maintaining it today and keeping it open for traffic that serves not just our small community on the Gray side, but the community on the Wyndham side, as well as the development up in James Way and Brewski and so on. So I just wanted to bring those points to your attention. Thank you.
You guys having fun yet? I'm not going to ask you to recuse yourself. I just wanted to start. So my name's Brian French. I live on Cottage Road in Gray, off Forest Lake. And I wanted to start by thanking you guys for your time, because I do actually think that this is a very difficult charge, and I know you guys are working towards a resolution. Initially, I have this whole speech. I'm not going to bother reading because most of the points have already been covered here. But a few of the things have not been mentioned yet that I'm a little bit worried about. So I love this proposal about the private roads providing access for 100 dwelling units. I think that's a great idea, and that in theory should help eliminate some of the dangers of truck traffic. But unfortunately, truck traffic is only one part of the quarry, as you've heard from basically everyone. I worry that there are still some potential loopholes that need to be addressed with this. There's the possibility. So look at the area of most of these quarries. Often they're so big, they kind of take up the whole area between two roads. So we put this standard in place that the trucks can't use this road, so a quarry doesn't belong there. But what's to stop the developer from potentially just punching out the other road? So say there's 100 people that use road A for access, but road B only has 85, so the quarry can go in there. So I think that the idea, the principle here is good. It's like you're close. The spirit of, where do these belong? Where do they not belong? And I think that that's basically what most of the people here would like to see addressed a little better. I worry about that loophole. I worry about the possibility, maybe only in certain circumstances, of a developer with ownership rights taking a road and upgrading it and turning it over to the town. That would not make it a private road anymore. And again, the issue here isn't that we want fewer private roads. It's that we don't want quarries in certain parts of town. I'm not going to bother reading the charge again. I think that everyone's kind of gotten into that. It seems like zoning really is what everyone's asking for, and it's what I would also ask for. I think that there are areas in town that if you walk or bike or run or visit, even drive through, you would say this is a bad place for a quarry. I don't know how you identify those. I think that this was a good attempt at that, to say these private roads and residential densities. Maybe there is something with residential densities. Maybe there is something with a quarter-mile or a half-mile radius from proposed sites. I don't have the answers. I really wish I did have the answers. I know you guys have been searching for answers for months now, and again, I commend you on that. I think you're close. I think you're onto something. I just don't think you've quite gotten there yet. And I wish you luck.
We've got maybe 10 or 15 more minutes, and then we could open it up for some questions and comments from the group as well.
Michael Manning. I just took over as the president of the James Way Road Association. I live at 3 Brewski. I missed the first half of this because I was with a bunch of little kids trying to teach them the game of football and talked to them at the very end of practice about being good citizens. We had a young man who quit the team because it just wasn't right for him. And we talked long and hard at the end of practice about when you see him, you say hi. You treat him with respect. You are still a member of this community, and the people on that team will set the example for this community. We're asking you to do exactly the same thing. We're charging the people who we elected to the council to do exactly the same thing. We, as the people who have the most to lose in this current fight, are only a part of it. The little guy in the back, my son, those other kids who are out there on the football field tonight, both male and female, are the ones who are going to have to deal with these particular pits. Not just the one that they're talking about now, but future pits. The zoning rules allow them to stick them in a lot of different places that we all realize now are not right. So one of the charges you had was to come up with possible zone changes that impact that. The second thing I want to say is our schools are already pretty much bursting at the seams. If you go over to Windham High School, they just put a trailer out back. They have a trailer outside the middle school now. They're looking at adding more classrooms. The number of kids in classrooms are going up. The primary school's cafeteria is so small, they have to run 6 or 7 lunches every day just to get the kids through. The kids have 20 minutes to eat. All right? Anybody in here have a little child or grandchild and try to get them to eat in 20 minutes? And that's from getting into the cafeteria to exiting the cafeteria. At some point, this town is going to have to make a capital investment in more schools. We've heard it multiple times at various council meetings that a large majority of our income comes from private residences. People moving into this town, buying home, and paying taxes on that land. This pit is going to cost the town a lot of money if it goes in. The next pit is going to cost even more. The pits do not generate enough income to offset what's being lost. So as people continue to move to Windham because it is a desirable place to live, the number of kids will go up. The number of people will go up. Our schools will get fuller. We'll get challenged to do more things. We're currently looking at putting in a community center. That would be a much better use of an area like that, or some other area instead of a pit. the money for that community center, the money for the waterworks that we have going, for all the roads we need to upgrade. I really do understand what you guys are doing. I'm on the private roads committee. It is not easy trying to find middle ground for people. Your charge, the charge of the council that's appointed you, is to make Windham better. There's nothing about this pit that makes Windham better. Nothing. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Heidi Joy, and I'm not sure, but I might be the newest member of Forest Avenue in Windham. I've grown up on the lake. My grandfather bought a camp probably in the 50s, and so I lived in Cumberland but enjoyed the lake every summer. About 4 years ago, we were fortunate enough to purchase the seasonal property next to our family camp, and my mother-in-law enjoys that place every summer. She used to rent it from the previous owner, and we were fortunate enough to be able to purchase that building and for her to enjoy that all summer long. As I said, we recently were blessed with being able to buy a place next door to that. Some folks might remember the Lovitz. It's the red place that sits right down on the water. And my husband and I are thrilled. We want to make this our forever home. It is year-round. However, it does need some upgrades. We are about to invest close to $20,000 on a new foundation to repair the existing block foundation. We're going to invest probably about $10,000 putting in new windows. We're going to put in new heating source. I noticed one of the performance standards mentioned something about the bond that the town of Windham would hold in case there was damage to well water or private well water within 100 feet. And I would like to see that amended to also include structural damage due to blasting, because the $20,000 I'm about to invest in a brand new foundation could easily be rattled and cracked and damaged by the blasting. My husband used to work in a quarry and knows all about it. So we just like to express that concern and have the committee consider adding that as part of the performance standard. That's it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tanya Marston, and I live at 26 Mystical Way in Cumberland. And I wasn't planning to speak here, but there is a concern that I have, is lying is not a crime, and transparency is not required in any kind of a business dealing or operation. And what I would say, regulations and ordinances are great for people who follow them. But what happens if somebody doesn't? I have lived beside an individual that didn't do that, and the cost that's involved when something happens, when something breaks, what are you going to do? Because after the 200-year-old tree is cut down, you can't cut it back up. Once the property is clear cut, it's gone. So what is the cost of saying all this great proposals and these rules when somebody doesn't follow them? And what's the cost to the people if the well water goes bad or the water goes bad? You can't get, those costs are too expensive. And I would caution you, just because somebody can does not mean it's right. Thank you.
Hi, Margaret Pinchbeck from Nash Road, and I've scribbled all over this. I don't have a prepared statement. But when we moved to Windham almost 20 years ago, we're in farm zone, and the Nash farm across 302 obviously was farm zone. And I think if I had known then what could be there, I wouldn't have bought where I did. And so one thing I ask you as a committee, when you look at the zoning, if there's an area where you're going to allow mineral extraction, come up with a new name. Don't just call it farm, because it's kind of misleading. Call it, farm mineral extraction or something. And then you can avoid a lot of the headaches, because when people move into an area and they say, okay, I'm surrounded by farm, they don't realize that to me, it's more an industrial use than farm. So anyway, most of my comments have been on the Section 13 blasting. And it says at least 48 hours in advance of a scheduled blast, the operator must notify code enforcement, fire department, property owners. I think, in my experience living across from the quarry, that actually 24 hours would be better, because the blasting companies won't blast if it's overcast. I don't know if that should be part of, if that should be included too. Most of them don't want to, because it magnifies the vibration, the noise, and the shock waves. And my fear is if somebody calls me 2 days before, they call me Monday, so we're going to blast Wednesday at 12 or between, 11 and 4 or whatever. You never know what the weather's going to be like. And I think, personally, I think 24 hours would be better. And also, when I talked with someone at Mean Blasting, there's also a list you can get on that will notify you right before a blast. And that would be super helpful, because we have animals. And, I could load the dogs in the car and take them out. Also, I think there should be something in.
That'll happen every day.
No, they don't blast. They don't blast every day. Not where I am. The blast horns. Sometimes we can hear them, and sometimes we can't. And I talked with the safety officer at Main Drilling and Blasting, and he said that they are primarily for the people working in the quarry. So it doesn't matter if the neighbors can hear them or not. And I would like that change. I think the neighbors need to be able to hear the horns. There's no way to explain it when you're sitting at home peacefully, and then like your whole world just starts shaking. And it's coming between 11 and 2, but if I had a little warning.
How are your children?
Well, that's another thing. When the quarry near me was approved, they tried to limit the hours of blasting to times when school buses wouldn't be going by. So I'm asking if instead of between 11 and 4, it could be 11 and 2 or even 10 and 2. I think that still gives them enough time to get the blast set up and detonate and clean up afterwards. But then you wouldn't have to worry about, the big concern was fly rock and school buses.
Mostly in the summer. I'm thinking about summer.
And we'll just a reminder, we're going to have one person at a time, and if you want to speak, we'll have a few more minutes after this. So, thank you.
Well, I think most quarries can operate year round. They usually, once you get a lot of snow, they don't. But and then about the pre-blast survey, I had a little trouble understanding it. The operator shall retain a copy for at least 1 year. Well, what I think is that the operator should hold them as long as the quarry is in operation. And the reason is, when the National Quarry first went into operation, the blasting company was McGoldrick Brothers, which I guess has been bought out, or somehow they're now Main Drilling and Blasting. But McGoldrick Brothers contracted out the pre-blast survey and to a company in Yarmouth. And they don't have them anymore. So when we want to file a claim because we hit a crack, there's nothing to compare it to. The original video that they took in our house of the walls and the foundation, they're gone. They're not required to keep them for over 5 years, according to the state. Now, Maine Drilling and Blasting does it themselves. They don't contract it out, and they hang on to them for, I guess, the life of the pit. But I think that would be a good thing to put in here. Just, it's actually as much protection for the pit owners as anything, because, you know, who's to say when that crack appeared? You know, if the pre-blast survey showed there was already a crack in one wall and that's gone. Anyway, let's see. Oh, the hours of operation. When we tried to change the ordinance years ago, we had a vote. We tried to put hours of operation in. Now, the quarry near us can't sell on Saturdays, which may put them at a disadvantage, but they have so many other quarries, it probably doesn't matter. But what I would like to see is no sales in any quarries on Saturday. It makes a huge difference because most people work during the week, and the only time they're home is on the weekends. And, you know, I would think the hours of operation, you wouldn't want to open before 7. Just, you know, some people sleep in. Let me see what else I scribbled down. Oh, yeah. So one of the biggest noisemakers for us is the air brakes on those trucks coming up 302. So most of your trucks going into quarries are empty, but they still use the air brakes. And it's constant. It's all day long. And I know some parts of town have, you know, the no air brakes signs. I'd like to have one near us. I don't know how to do it, but we asked about that when the quarry was approved, and they said they didn't have any way to enforce it. But, you know, same with the speed limit sign, right? You put it up and you hope that most people will follow it. I would think that, you know, for empty trucks, I don't think they have to use the air brakes. So if that's something you could consider, I'd appreciate it. I would also like to see no excavation below the water table allowed ever, even if you get a waiver. It's really easy to get waivers from the DEP. It's really to get approval from the DEP. The quarry across from us was approved by the DEP, and they never set foot on it. You have to, you know, submit a certain amount of paperwork, maps, deeds. You have to sign something saying, yes, I'm going to follow all the rules, and then you have your approval. I think a lot of people put too much stock in what DEP says. You know, like when they got this waiver to blast below the water table, which was before you owned it, they had a meeting with the DEP, and with the neighbor, the DEP had to have a meeting with us, and they still said, oh yeah, we still plan to reclaim the land. I mean, so how can you reclaim it? It's going to be underwater. Well, it'll be a little wetter, but we're going to reclaim it. I mean, I don't know if they thought we were morons or what, but it really changes the whole way the water moves through any area. You know, all the flow in the rock is going to get disrupted, and I would really like to see that. I don't know if non-waivable is a word, but I'd like to see no blasting below the water table. I mentioned the hours. I think, you know, the existing pits and quarries could be grandfathered, but I'd like to see new quarries and pits have no Saturday hours and nothing before 7 during the week. I guess that's it. The code enforcement officer, I would rather see 2 times a year because a lot can happen in a year. That's just my suggestion, but that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've covered a lot of ground tonight. Is there anyone else who has something that hasn't come up or hasn't been emphasized to this point?
I haven't heard anything about noise decibels.
Come on up if you want to make a comment. The comment was about noise levels. Was that?
Are there minutes to the meetings that the committee has had posted anywhere from your meetings and your work?
Yes, they're all on the town website.
The meetings, the minutes?
Yeah, we'll get to that in just one moment. We'd like to give this gentleman a chance to speak.
My name is Bob Joy. Oh, I spoke earlier. I haven't heard anything about noise decimals. I've worked around quarries all my life, and they tend to be loud. Noise travels quite a ways, even if you do have buffers. But I'll just keep it short and sweet. I haven't heard anything about noise decimals, so that would be something to consider. Thanks.
Thank you. Yep.
Good evening. My name is Richard Mazzola, and I live at 87 Lakeside Drive during the summer. This evening I heard that there was going to be a meeting. I drove all the way up from Connecticut today to be here to the city of Boston. My client wasn't too happy because I left early the meeting, but I knew it was important for me to be here. I listened to a lot of stats tonight. There was a lot of people who put a lot of time into this. My point, I think, need to be said is that you people have an obligation to protect the neighbors, the residents. I'm sorry. There's a need for the board to protect all the residents and all the neighbors. Keeping this quarry close to residents causes all kinds of questions in health, the quality of the lake, the quality of water. People should be happy where they're living. I'm going to be short here, but the obligation is yours to please do all you can to protect these people and to probably hold back this quarry. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to have a little bit of comment and talk a little bit about next steps before we wrap up, and keep that as close to 8 o'clock as possible for people. I'm not sure if there are some general comments that you or Drew may want to talk about, but I think it is important for folks to know what's next, certainly. Do you want to go, Amanda? And then we got the minutes question, too.
Sure. To answer the question about notes from the meetings, there are a couple meetings that have notes that are on the website, and the rest have not been completed. They're just meeting weekly. It hasn't fulfilling the needs of what's required for the committee had been a priority. So the notes have not been completed. I think the end result, though, of the discussions has been this product that is before you. Next steps is that I think the committee is going to have a meeting next week. We need to kind of take some reaction to the public input, continue some work to make determinations if changes will be made to this draft, and ultimately come up with a final draft to make a recommendation to the council, which will go through that process I detailed at the beginning of the meeting. I think what hasn't been, it's happened somewhat through the process. I think certainly, this was the one public forum. The committee has not been having public comments at its regular meetings. You certainly can, to put it on the record, in a room full of people, send written comments to the committee through me at any time.
Okay. And I wanted to reiterate a point that was made earlier, too, is that even though this is the first chance to take a look at what's been drafted up as a proposal, there will be an official process whereby the council reviews it, sends it to the planning board, and they will have a public hearing. The council will have their own public hearing as this goes forward, so that this is certainly one step in a process. I think it was important to have your feedback at this point, and I've tried to take good notes, and we'll be formalizing this for the committee to review at their next meeting. Can you, or do you have a sense of when the what kind of timeline the council is expecting?
No, I don't think. I mean,
were they going to give you enough time as you need?
We kind of set our timeline, right, Amanda? So I don't think we do back at any given point, or.
I want to bring up one point.
Can you
watching their comments tonight?
Can you? Thank you.
One point I'd like to bring up. Are we ready now? Is the microphone working? Okay. The point I'd like to bring up, I'm wondering, after hearing the public comments tonight, it seems like they're missing a lot of information about our discussion. Is it possible for us to record our meetings so they have access? Because they're asking some questions over and over, things that we brought up already, and zoning issues, and this committee is imbalanced. There's only 2 of us who are residents who have that experience, and we're always overridden by the professionals who are on this committee. And I think that if we were to record the meetings, then the public would be able to see what that is and be able to bring that information to the planning board. I think it's important. I think we have some misleading and people are misguided. There's 2 people here who are residents, and the rest of the people don't have access to that. And Donna's not here, so.
Yeah, this meeting's being recorded, and I think the committee can talk about video.
Yes, I know this is, but I'm talking about every Thursday as we get together for the Mineral Extraction Committee. The questions that they bring up over and over from the public comments are things that we have been struggling with, and I think recording the meetings would keep this transparent and give people access from now on, and that would help keep us accountable as well. I mean, is that okay?
I think that's fine. That's up for the committee to talk about. It's just a matter of scheduling that this room isn't always available for that kind of recording. So we would have we'd have to have alternative means.
Okay. Does anyone else on the committee have anything they want to add?
I'd like to just add a few things, I guess.
Red button on.
Yep, sorry. First of all, I'm really impressed with the amount of love you guys have for that lake, and
This town.
And I think it's great that you do that. And I grew up. My parents had a little place up on Bonnie Eagle Pond in Standish, and we got the chores done. Sometimes on a hot day we'd run up there, and it's some of my best memories in childhood. And I always wanted to live on a lake my whole life, so I bought a place on the Little Basin up here in Wyndham. So I get it, how important it is, and I'm not here to say that gravel pits should be everywhere. I think everyone should be on its own merits. But as a board, we're here for the town, not for the Forest Lake Quarry. And I think when that goes to the planning board and wherever it goes, it should be looked at as that specific one. But to say that zoning, we're going to zone gravel pits are in sand and gravel aquifers, and quarries are in ledge deposits, and they're not all over town. They're only in certain spots. So it's a very hard thing to zone. And when you guys talk about schools and the kids, and I agree, but if we're going to keep having kids, we're going to keep needing hospitals and schools and sand for roads, and you can't just say we're going to shut down Wyndham and expect Gorham or Buxton to take all the gravel pits. And when you do that, you're affecting that many more people because you've got to drive through that many more places. So those of you that talk about you built a new home, well, luckily you had local pits to get that material from, because that's the most expensive part is trucking. I just want to say the other side, because all we are is answering a need, and the need comes from population growth, and we can't build a school or a house without gravel pits.
And where do you work?
And I work at Shaw Brothers Construction.
Yeah.
So
that's true, but the whole point is making the ordinances to
No.
where they should be appropriate in
Right.
appropriate areas.
And I'm not saying that your area should be a quarry. I'm not saying that, and I don't want to defend anything up there, because that would be a tough situation where you guys are with the road situation. But we do, what we're looking at is the entire town, and so we're not trying to look specifically at this committee. I think when it gets to the planning board, that's what they have to do, and they should break down every one of these concerns you guys have. And I agree with you. It's very, very important to keep these lakes clean. It's everything. And I've been on the non-point source committee with the DEP now for I think 18 years, and the biggest problem we've been trying to fight with on these lakes are the dirt roads, which one of you guys brought up. They are a problem. So there's a lot of things we can do to help the lakes, but we shouldn't blame it all on pits and quarries, because I don't think that they've caused a lot of problems to the lakes. I think there's a lot of pressure on these lakes, and what you guys are doing, I applaud. I think it's awesome that you guys have such a good community to keep working on that. But I just wanted to say it isn't this. We tried not to look at your quarry. We tried to look at the whole town.
Any other final thoughts or comments from committee members at this point?
Thank you guys all for coming out and giving us input tonight. Heard what you said.
Do you mind if I make one final comment or suggestion?
This will be the last one.
Okay. Sorry.
And then I'm sure people would be willing to stick around, but as far as the formal meeting.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
I just wanted to let you know that Cumberland has changed its own ordinances and has put a plan in place to stop future mineral extraction within its town limits. So it can be done, and I would urge you to perhaps maybe look to them as maybe a guide in the direction of determining how and where you would limit it within the town of Wyndham. So
That's Stephanie Kopp.
yeah, COPP, by the way. Thank you.
All right.
One more thing, Bob Joy. You mentioned about noise. If you go to the Wyndham website and look under the land use ordinances, section 812, you can find what we've done for the noise in there. Okay, 812.
Yes, there are decibel level. Well, do they read them when there's a complaint? There are noise standards and site plan review.
We'll close out. Thank you, everybody.